everyone, and welcome to another MSP event. We're super excited to dive right into this topic, but we'll give couple more minutes for folks to trickle in. As you know, we love to start things off with a little fun icebreaker. And I'd love to know, Max and Pete, what song kept you going this week? And we can kick things off with Max.
I don't know if it's a particular song, but I've been listening to a bunch of like ABBA for the last like few days. And so
Love
just
it.
like on repeat, it's been really good, like hit of like energy every morning. So been loving
Oh,
that.
Oh,
that's a. I'm inspired. Now I want. Now I want. I'm gonna be on.
Give it a
After this,
try. Yeah.
I'm gonna be on Spotify, like ABBA's greatest hits. I think my. I don't know if it's been keeping me going per se, but my son is like super obsessed with the Nutcracker. Um, and so like I can't wait to see what my Spotify rap looks like next year. So I've just, for whatever reason, been listening to a lot of that. What about you, Ange? What song or artist has been keeping you going?
Yeah, I recently fell right back in love with Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. I've just been
Mm.
listening to it on repeat. After it's finished, I'm like, okay, I think I need to play it again. And then I'm like, okay, one more
Just
time.
one more time.
And I'm just one more time. And so the whole night the other day I was making dinner and it was just like Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, like on repeat. It's
Just
such a
looping.
feel-good song. But I'll switch things up with ABBA. So thanks for that recommendation, Max.
You're
I
welcome.
I love this. This is fantastic.
All right, let's kick things off. I'm super excited to dive right into this topic. Be the king or queen, not jester of the boardroom, data driven board meetings. But before we begin, I'll say a few words about the team at Modern Sales Pros. Hi, everyone. My name is Angelica. I'm one of the community event managers at MSP. And for those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through like our sessions like the one you're at today, our online forum, and our quarterly summits, and we're getting back into in-person events. So if you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join after this event. Now, before we dive in, some quick housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded, so you'll be able to access the key takeaways and the presentation and the recording on the MSP previous event page before the end of the day. Second, if you have a question for Pete and Max, be sure to leverage the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner or in the chat, and also let us know where you're calling in from. Now, I'm super pleased to announce our sponsor for today's event, Atrium. I'm actually going to pass it off to Pete to say a few words about Atrium, and then I'll come back for wrap up. Pete, take it away.
Thanks, Angelica. Appreciate it. All right, let me share my screen here. Let me clear my throat. Wonderful. So, hey, folks, my name is Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. Kind of more intros here for myself and Mr. Max here in a second. But for folks who are maybe not familiar, Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. So it's software that helps sales organizations, so AE, SDR, and AMCSM managers and leaders use data to improve team performance. And so what it does is, what Atrium does is continuously monitors dozens and dozens and dozens of AE and SDR KPIs and proactively alerts managers, leaders, operations, reps too when something is off with your reps, your team, and so on. And so what this means is that sales organizations like managers can get ahead of coaching insights faster and drive positive behavior change and win. And so one of the cool things about Atrium is just takes 2 minutes to set up with a read-only connection to your Salesforce CRM. You can sign up for a free account by doing that and be on your merry way. So cool. Let's do some intros here. My name is Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders here at Atrium. I'm also responsible for our go-to-market function. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. That's really where I went from being a kind of a founder kind of business generalist to being a first seller, or first sales manager, first sales leader over there at Talentpin. And then when we were acquired by Monster, I was responsible for new product sales at Monster worldwide. Subsequent to that, after I left Monster, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then started the Modern Sales Pro community. So that's a little bit on me. I would love to introduce my colleague, Mr. Max Klang, one of our senior account executives over here. Max, maybe you can share a little bit about how you spend your time here at Atrium and some of the sales motions you worked on previously.
Yeah, totally. As Pete mentioned, I'm a senior AE here at Atrium. Been here almost 2 years now, which is really crazy to think about. And I've been selling for about 6-ish years. Had a kind of couple runs at Asana and then Bright Edge. And I kind of spend my days here talking with like sales leaders, sales managers, RevOps folks, just about like sales strategy, sales coaching, rep performance, and all things in between. So super excited to chat today.
Nice. Well, wonderful. Thanks for joining, Max. I'm excited for you to provide your 2 cents as we go through things. Just really quick before we get jamming here, we like to provide offers to folks who are attending, and the offer that we got here today is Atrium is hosting a complimentary sales leadership boot camp with a virtual boot camp with Richard Harris. Richard Harris, of course, is a absolutely fantastic manage sales, sales trainer, enablement specialist, etc. And so he does boot camps, virtual boot camps for Atrium for leaders, sales leaders, and also sales managers. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to drop that link to sign up for that here in the chat. And all we ask for in exchange is a quick chat around how you are doing data-driven sales management or not at your organization for in exchange for that time. So cool. So what are we talking about today? We are going to be talking about data-driven board meetings. And specifically how you can master the sales section of your board meeting in a snap without it actually being like a huge pain in the booty. So what we're going to talk about here a little bit is what effective board meetings look like and the data associated with that. And then we're going to talk about like different ways you can think about how you would use data in different sections of your your kind of like sales section of your board meeting, right? Because essentially what you as a sales manager, or sorry, as a sales leader, want to have, obviously you want to have command of your business, but you also want to be able to demonstrate that to your boss's boss, the board of your organization, that you do have a good handle, a good command on the business, and then also do that without actually like maybe breaking the bank from a time standpoint, because a lot of times organizations can go into like a deep freeze for a couple weeks before a board meeting trying to create the relevant assets. And so we want to talk about the assets that you might want to have for those meetings, but also the most effective ways of doing that. So first, let's kind of talk about like what board meetings are for. So a board meeting is part of the like a healthy operating rhythm for the business. And when I say operating rhythms, the way organizations work is, it's not like a bunch of 6-year-olds playing soccer where everyone's just kind of like running after the ball, what have you. Instead, what you have is you have a structured operating rhythm for different teams, the organization. So like, your sales team, as an example, they're probably on a quarterly bookings basis, but then also they probably have like monthly monthly status kind of sales team meetings that are kind of focused on how progress is going towards that. And then maybe on a weekly basis, you have various meetings for different teams and what have you on how things are progressing. And then assets, kind of like metrical assets or analytical assets that support that. The board meeting is kind of like the superset of that, which is kind of like related to QBRs. But in this case, what you're doing is you're reporting out to folks that are responsible for the governance of your organization to make sure that it's that the organization is progressing the way that it's supposed to be. And so then like there's kind of different parts of what that board meeting might look like. So first, one of the benefits of preparing a data rich sales section of your board deck would be to take stock of your business, right? It's a forcing function for you to look back at the last quarter and say, what happened? What happened? What was good? What was bad? Did we do what we thought we were going to do? Did we not? Did we do better? Did we do worse? Why? And then what are the actions that might come out of that? So it's a great forcing function, the same way that like a sales team meeting is like, what happened last week and how are we doing this month? It's doing that on a quarterly basis as a forcing function to understand what happened, why, and what we might want to change about it. The second thing that we might that's powerful for board meetings is providing an outlook on the upcoming quarter, and looking at it, like how is that, how are we trending? Are we set up for success there? If we are, great. Are there other things that can we maybe get more aggressive? Can we do other things that can we turn our attention to other things? If we're not, if we're looking, and a lot of organizations are in this situation right now, if we're not trending the way that we would like to be, are there opportunities for us to intervene? Can we change, right? Can we change the behavior of our team, or individual reps, teams, segments appropriately? And then that kind of goes to the third piece here, which is what are can we check in on key initiatives? Like maybe last time we said, hey, we were going to focus in on a very specific initiative with respect to our SDR team or AE team, or maybe a specific subsegment of things. How did that initiative play out? And then secondarily, what are the next initiatives that we might be focused on based on the information that we pulled together there? Max, I know that you work with a lot of our larger organizations here at Atrium. When you kind of talk with like sales operations folks and kind of sales leaders about how they're taking stock of their business or kind of like looking forward to the forward quarter, what are the things that kind of like loom large for those folks ahead of those board meetings?
I think like the biggest thing is just like how much time it is to like go and grab all of the necessary reporting. And so
Sure.
like anytime I'm having conversations like leading into that, that's always like the big thing. They're just like totally overwhelmed and consumed with like going and finding all of the like, again, things that they need to have prepared for that meeting. And it can run across a whole variety of different things, from like stage funnel conversions, forward looking, pipe coverage, AE leveling from like a, capacity planning standpoint. And like all of those are like very different reports that you need to go and grab. And so thus they like take a lot of time to go and like get them, put them together, action them, and then deliver the insight.
Yeah, it's like it's definitely a source of commiseration with sales operations folks when we're talking to them, right? Like, what are you spending your time doing? Are you able to like support your managers?
Mm-hmm.
No, man, I got to like go into a cave for 3 weeks every quarter to 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 prepare a board meeting. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and let's talk about last quarter's outcomes. And so this is kind of some examples of things you might put together in your sales teams section to do a look back on the last quarter. So a couple things there. Where did we end up from a booking standpoint? I mean, yeah, duh, Pete. What actually happened with our pipeline? So like we entered the quarter with a certain amount of pipeline. What happened with it? Where'd it go? Breaking that apart into per rep contribution. This is where organizations will oftentimes fall short, is because if you think about the output of a sales organization, it's really just the summation of the outputs of all the people in the sales organization. So looking
Mm-hmm.
at what efficiency look like on a per rep basis, maybe if you're in a 10, 20, 30, 40, and then potentially breaking that on a per team basis if you get a lot larger than that. How is our per rep efficiency there? What did our rep utilization and activity look like? And then also how did our pipeline generation look, and how is it setting us up for next quarter? So obviously bookings here. So these are like just screenshots from these are live screenshots from an anonymized Atrium account here, but obviously bookings pretty straightforward, right? Like here we go, like this organization is growing their bookings over time, pretty basic stuff, right? But that's not where we're going to stop. Instead, what we would say is, hey, here's what happened last quarter, right? We entered the quarter with 14 million. This is a Atrium KPI called pipeline change, where what this is looking at is it's looking at what happened with the pipeline that that we entered last quarter with, and how did it kind of play out. So we entered last quarter, and this again is anonymized data from this organization, entered the quarter with $14 million of pipeline. They added just a little bit of pipeline for, and this is $14 million of pipeline that was scheduled to close anywhere between July 1st and September 30th, right? So they added a little bit more pipeline. They pulled some in that was out of that quarter. Some of it increased by value, but like barely, and ended up booking $3.2 million of that. So that's cool. Where else did that pipeline go? Well, unsurprising, a bunch of it closed lost, as we would expect. But maybe a bigger thing is that a bunch of it pushed out. So about $5.6 million of pipeline ended up pushing out. So of the $14 million that the organization started the quarter with, about a third of it ended up pushing out. And so what this might indicate, and you would compare this to how this looked maybe in the prior board meeting, the one before that, and say, hey, are we getting better or worse from a precision of forecasting? Like, hey, if we're pushing out a bunch of pipeline, why is that even scheduled during this quarter to begin with? Because like we're kind of head faking ourselves there. About $1.8 million decreased in value. And that's essentially just opportunities that were sized a certain amount and kind of compressed down. On its face, like there's nothing here that like pops out as like, oh man, look out. This is more about understanding how this compares to how your organization has done in the past, and then using that information. So either saying, are we getting better? Or are we getting worse? And then moreover, looking at this and saying, hey, is there maybe an area for improvement? So in this case, this kind of feels like a lot of pipe, like maybe this is something intrinsic to this organization's business, but it does feel like this is a pretty big amount of pipeline to be pushing out, given the fact it's like a third of the pipe they started with. So that might indicate to us that there's probably an opportunity for this organization to be crisper around its close dates, and coach their reps to say, hey, you know what? Don't calendar something as closing if you're not confident on it, right? Like, put it much further out in the future. Max, I know this is a pretty dense KPI chart here, but Max, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of organizations have a similar problem here with like pipeline being
Sure.
pushed out, and it's
Yeah.
a sad story because like they'll report their pipe coverage for the upcoming quarter, and
We're
it'll
gonna
be
kill it.
based off what the pipeline looks like at the beginning of that month, and then 2-3 weeks in they have reps pushing or close losting a bunch of like stale deals.
Yeah.
And so that pipeline that they saw at the beginning of that new quarter is just like not real, because half of that number is getting pushed out or closed lost because reps are cleaning their pipeline in that time. And so it's really, really important to make sure you're tracking pipeline that gets pushed out of the close period or closed lost, on a weekly, monthly basis, and being able to like visualize that before you go and commit to some pipeline number to your team.
Right. Yeah. So like for instance, and I think we'll talk about this in the upcoming section. Like, imagine, let's like run the clock back 90 days, or like we're walking into this quarter with 14 million in pipeline. Like, we feel like kings of the universe. Well, it turns out, right, like maybe this is hopefully this sales leader didn't commit to like a $5 million quarter based on a bunch of pipeline. Was like, yeah, no, I'm gonna push that out. Awesome. So then the other thing that we would want to pay attention to, so like this is like fairly basic here, right? It's last quarter's outcomes, but a thing that's really important that a lot of organizations don't like really zoom in on as well as they could, is looking at things on a per rep basis, right? And so in this case, and I'm actually just gonna make this a little bit bigger here because I'm kind of unhappy with how small it is. Hopefully you guys can see a little bit bigger, better there. So what we got here is we've got on a rep by rep basis here, right? We got our bookings, we got our wins here, and so we can see there's actually like some pretty good variation in rep performance here. In this case, I like, this is another kind of anonymized organization in Atrium. I think these are some enterprise reps right here, but you can kind of see some banding here. But I think some interesting things here that you might that kind of call out is, yeah, you do actually have some reps who are pretty underperformant there. The other thing that you can kind of call out is by looking at both bookings, and we don't want to just like look at bookings on their own, because that sort of like lagging indicator myopia can kind of head fake us. So in this case, one of the things we will note is Henry Fenner here, 200 and whatever that is, 211K of bookings out of boy, right? 5 deals, right? 5 deals. So it's pretty impressive for this person right here. But like, we would probably just want to keep an eye on that, because this is a very risky, like this is probably an enterprise rep for this team, but a little bit of like a risky proposition here, insofar as like if he does, if he only closes 4 of those, or have, closes 3, well, we're in a much different situation there. Right. And so this is just like, a little bit of a higher risk situation. Anita Radcliffe here, what's kind of fascinating with her is you can see that actually she's doing a similar amount of bookings here. Like she's probably like more, in mid-market land here. But with 9, with 9 deals. And so like this kind of indicates to us that like this is what top performance might look like for that segment. Then there's folks that we might be a little worried about. And so in this case, we have this rep right here, Agent Wendy Peakley here. These are hilarious demo names. 72K in bookings. We might look at that and say like, oh, okay, like that's cool, right? Like that's not a problem. But what is interesting is if you look at how many wins she actually has quite a few wins, right? And so this is something where we might kind of say like, hey, like, is there a reason why like your ASP is this low? This might be something that we would want to catch and kind of work on going forward. This is something, of course, like useful to report out on a board meeting, but also something that you can imagine also showing up in a in a QBR as well. And then do the same thing with the other drivers of the revenue formula, right? So win rate and average selling price. So again, what we can kind of see here is we have some of our reps that are down here, a little bit of a lower ASP. And again, this is kind of a mix of enterprise and commercial reps here. But if for whatever reason, some of these reps that had the lower ASP were not in the segment that we would expect them to be down at here, that would be something that like we'd potentially worry about, right? And I think then over here on win rate land, this is obviously like efficiency is really, really important right now, and making sure that reps are doing a good job with the opportunities that are coming into their pipe. And so in this case, this is really where we would look and say, hey, are there reps that we really need to coach up this quarter, or potentially move out, right? And we can see that there's a handful of reps who are really down here, kind of in the lower part of the win rate leaderboard here. And so just making sure that you're breaking these things apart on a rep by rep basis ends up being a pretty powerful thing to do, just so you make sure that you have command. Again, this is taking stock of what happened last quarter, right? And so in the case of Anita Radcliffe and Mr. Stork there, from an output standpoint, right, we've got so Anita here obviously is she actually took care of business with respect to bookings in a pretty meaningful fashion there, with a high number of wins, but with a really, really low win rate. And so that indicates to me that maybe she's kind of being overloaded. She's probably, I imagine, if we look at her customer facing meeting volume, it's probably absolutely bananas. If she's if she's driving this amount of bookings off of this amount of wins with this low win rate, she must just be hustling her buns. And so that's probably an opportunity for tuning things up right there. Or maybe what we can do is we can raise that win rate by virtue of kind of redirecting some of the opportunities that are coming into our pipe, because it really does seem like a lot of those opportunities are falling on the ground. Max, anything you wanted to call out on kind of like rep by rep win rate and average selling price, things to kind of pay
Yeah,
attention to?
yeah. I mean, like getting to quota and like closing a lot of business is super cool, but like the most important thing is like understanding why or how each rep got there. And if they didn't get there, it's even more important to understand why they missed. So as you can see with like, I don't know, Henry, I think it was our number one AE, like he was 1 or 2 deals away from just being like middle of the pack, right? And so like that means,
Right.
again, he's like vulnerable. And so
Yeah.
like
Risky.
understanding understanding how someone was successful is so important, because like you don't want to get surprised next quarter when they have a couple bad bounces or a couple things don't go their way or what have you.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Looking ahead, right? Like taking stock so we can look ahead. And then looking at like productivity as well. So total number of opportunity ownership, how loaded are our reps. And then similarly, customer facing meeting volume. And so what's kind of interesting here is if you look again, kind of pairing these things together. So opportunity ownership is of course how many at bats people are having there. And so are they doing a good job of like taking swings at those when they have the opportunity? So what's kind of fascinating here again, as you can see Prince Philip here, pretty good opportunity ownership there. Very, very low customer facing meeting volume, right? So like surprisingly, so it's like, what are you doing with your ops? Similarly, Granny Rose here, very low meeting volume here, but in line with lower opportunity ownership volume there, but something to kind of like pay attention to. And then really kind of concerning would be, hey, here's this rep right here, Robert Zemisky here, in line with everybody else, but like there's something just substantially off with respect to his customer facing meeting volumes. And then kind of on the flip side, these reps are kind of like hitting the cover off the ball with respect to customer facing meeting volumes. One thing that's pretty subtle is you can actually see, and I think actually Agent Wendy Peakley, yeah, her win rate was like okay, but what's kind of fascinating you can see here is like the dark blue is initial meetings, so like first meetings, like first dates, and then the light blue is follow-up meetings. And so what you can kind of see here is that Agent Wendy Peakley, she's like pretty heavy on those follow-up meetings, which can be a good thing to a point, right? And so what you can see here is that you might expect her win rate to be a little bit higher given how deep she's getting with some of these accounts. And so there's probably an opportunity here to do some like further coaching with respect to her and figuring out what is like where are her ops getting stuck, because having lots and lots and lots of second and third dates without a commensurate high win rate, it might indicate a bunch of like incremental meetings that are less efficient than they could be, like having meetings with people who don't have power, things like that. Cool. So then the other things that we would want to look at here, so that's rep specific. So then the other thing we want to look at is things that were generated last quarter that are going to impact the coming quarter. And so that would be something like pipeline generation, right? So like new pipeline ownership, aggregate pipeline. So like I actually recommend that folks do both of these things. So new pipeline ownership is how much pipe actually came into rep pipelines, right? So it's like being added, and that's different than total pipeline ownership. And I know that sounds kind of like a subtle difference there, but like the way to think about pipeline ownership, it's like how much is in everybody's pipe, right? Like the pool that is like filled with water, like how full is the pool? Whereas in this case, new pipeline inflow is going to be more how is stuff coming in, right? Like because this is a super critical thing, is like we need to make sure that there's a constant inflow of opportunity and pipe coming into our reps pipeline. Or else, because naturally the reps are going to be close lossing things, et cetera. And so there's going to be outflow. And so we got to make sure that things are coming into the pipe there appropriately. A more sophisticated version of this is really powerful, is looking at pipeline that reaches a certain stage, because this can be when you're thinking about forecasting, this can be a really powerful thing. Is if you're only looking at like total pipeline, right? Well, that can be a mix of a bunch of different things. And if you're looking at like total new pipeline inflow, but maybe one of the things that you might want to a more precise version of that would be how much pipeline is actually reaching like SAO, right? How much pipeline is actually making it to where we know it like is more real, if you will. And then there can be incremental versions of that as well, right? Where we can say, hey, look, how much pipeline reached stage 3, whatever the kind of a further down funnel stage might be for you. And so what you can kind of see here that's kind of interesting is in this organization, you can kind of see they've had more and more pipeline reaching SAO. This, of course, would be a little bit of a lagging indicator here because it's a couple stages further on. But if for whatever reason you had a bunch of pipeline that was reaching SAO and you didn't have a commensurate amount of pipeline that was reaching negotiation, well, that should scare you. Right, because things are coming things are coming down, like making it here, and then they're not making it any further there. And so this can be this is a little bit more difficult to calculate in the CRM. And so, this is why one of the things that our customers really like here at Atrium is there's a specific card called Pipeline at Stage Reached, which allows you to see the total number of ops that have made it to a certain stage, the total number of either on a per rep basis, manager basis, or a team basis, or total basis, or in this case, the addition of that, which is how much pipeline has gotten there. Wonderful. So let's talk about. So that was kind of like taking stock, right? Like taking stock of the quarter. Well, now what about like looking forward? And so these would be things like a little preview of the upcoming quarter. How's our forecast looking? What about the quarter after that? How's that looking on a per rep basis as well? And so in this case, what we would want to be doing is like looking forward at our pipeline by close date. So again, we were here, right? We're coming out of this quarter, and now we're coming into this quarter. So what does that pipeline look like on for the upcoming quarter? And you can kind of see, this is the pipeline that's been close one already. Into this quarter, we can also see the stuff that's on deck there. A more advanced version of this that I'm a big fan of is what we call win rate weighted pipe. It's actually a special metric that Atrium has that takes all the opportunities that are in various stages, and it looks at the historical win rate based on that stage for the given rep who's owned that. So essentially, it's like a weighted pipeline, but instead of it being kind of like the silly weighted percentages in that like we just kind of rough into place in Salesforce. Instead, it's actually using the specific win rate associated with each rep and the stage in their pipe that those ops are at. And then you would do the kind of the same thing for the next quarter as well. So like this is like, hey, what's happening with this quarter here? And then what is stuff looking like for the quarter after that? So this is this quarter, but then what about the next quarter as well? And I think oftentimes what can end up happening is people can get pretty juiced on the fact that they might have like a ton of pipe in the out quarters. But I think the important thing to be mindful of there, again, looking at win rate weighted pipe, is that a lot of that stuff is going to be up funnel, if you will. And so like the win rates from stage 0, the win rates from stage 1 are going to be substantially lower than the win rates from down funnel pipe. And so just making sure that your expectations are a little bit more tempered there, around how much kind of how much gas there is in the tank there. Max, anything you'd like to add on kind of like the looking ahead for the quarter kind of front?
No, all the time though, I see folks like always being super reliant on those like Salesforce probability stages, and I
It's
always
crazy,
just laugh
right?
because it's so silly because they're usually very arbitrary, and oftentimes those were like set in stone like 2 sales leaders ago, right? And so it's not even like relevant or credible. And so being able to understand like rep by rep based on like their stage conversions and their win rates from the various stages is just like super powerful, because not all ops in a certain stage for each rep are going to be created equal, and so you need to like treat it as such.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point about on a rep by rep basis, I think that making sure that we're looking at our reps in question and how they're looking can be a good thing. So to our point about our buddy Henry Fenner, from who was our top performer last time, looks like he's in a really good spot here, right? Like the weighted pipeline that he has calendar to close this coming quarter, is in a good spot there, right? And I think another kind of thing that's kind of fun about this is you can see that he's like maybe a little bit down from a as compared to other people with respect to his actual like raw pipeline, but because his win rates have been so good historically, he's kind of up here at the top there as well. Similarly, like you can kind of see Little John here. If you were only looking at his pipeline right here, you might say like, oh, okay, he looks like he's like pretty solid here. But if you instead look at his win rate weighted pipeline, you can see that like we might be a little bit more worried about that. Cool. So the next thing that we might the next thing I like to talk about or like cover in a board meeting is what I call fingerprint of success. So what we've been talking about is totals. These are all totals right here, right? Totals. Oops, totals here. And then we have individual, so individual bookings, individual win rates, etc. But one of the things that's important to pay attention to in your organization is like what I like to call the physics of your sales org. And so what are the how are the core mechanics, whoopsie daisy, how are the core mechanics of your sales motion doing and changing, and how is it, and so like paying attention to that to make sure that like things aren't changing in a meaningful fashion can be a very powerful thing to do. And so good examples of this would be, so the things you would want to look at from a fingerprint of success standpoint would be per rep bookings productivity, right? So we have our, this is kind of our per rep bookings productivity here, but like obviously see there's a big blend here. So what is the actual average of that, right? And the same with respect to win rate, the same with respect to average selling price. The same with respect to AE meeting productivity, the same with respect to AE opportunity ownership, the same with respect to pipe ownership as well. And so what we can kind of like look at that here a little bit. So here's per rep bookings. You can see for this organization kind of, jumping along at around like 100K in 100K in bookings on a per quarter basis. And then all of a sudden it jumps down pretty substantially there. Right. So it seems like something happened in Q2 2022. Weird, right? So that's an important thing for us to pay attention to from and say, hey, did something change? And then moreover, is there something we can do about that? Same with other drivers of the bookings formula. So in this case, we can see that there was a pretty substantial change in win rate there in the May quarter. And then that followed along in the August quarter as well. And you can see the same thing with respect to average selling price. So in general, this organization's sales motion looks like some of the physics associated with it is it's deteriorating in some regard, which is not super surprising because this is part of the kind of like economic wobbliness that's happening. So one of the other things that you can do is you can look at customer, like essentially productivity. So these are parts of the bookings driver here. Then you've got our customer facing meetings on a per rep basis. And so what's kind of interesting about this organization is you can see that they actually meaningfully changed their customer facing meeting volume on a per rep basis. So they went from being in the 70s and the 80s range to about 116 here. So this is actually an Atrium, an anonymized Atrium customer here. And so this is after they implemented Atrium. They had a big initiative around productivity on the AE team and doing more customer facing meeting volume. And so you can kind of see the outputs associated with that, both on a quarterly basis and then also on a monthly basis there. You can say the same thing kind of happening with respect to opportunity ownership on a rep by rep basis. So again, fingerprint of success. What like historically we can see, hey, these reps have generally carried anywhere between 20 to like 25-ish opportunities. I got a little bit higher kind of end of last year. And then moreover, what you can kind of see is then it kind of like settles into this like 20 range. After they had an initiative to have their AEs working more substantially on driving more pipeline, and you can actually see that with respect to opportunity ownership here, and also new opportunity inflow. And of course, that's then reflected in their pipeline ownership. So you can see that they were kind of like steady state here with respect to pipe, and then recently they've been doing a good job of driving more pipe ownership there. Anything that you'd want to add to any of these fingerprints of success, Max?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about like a fingerprint of success in your own sales org, it's important to try to like uncover like a really important key insight that you can then project to the board, project to your team, and then set KPIs around. Like a good example of that is like at Atrium, like one of our most important metrics is how many like data lights we do, which is basically a free account setup. It's like a mid-funnel stage in our sales process, and it's really important for us because like we'll win like 50% of those deals, right? And so when you have one of those stages and one of those like insights that you can grab onto, it's just super, super compelling and super, super important. Again, when you're reporting up and down in your organization, and then again, just like breaking up your sales motion into two components.
Yep, for sure. Quick commercial for Atrium on that front. So one of the things that we work with our customers on doing is helping them do better sales management, which includes leadership, which is what we're talking about right now, through metrics, because high performing sales management is really the difference between underperforming sales organizations and outperforming ones. Challenge, of course, is that sales management is pretty hard. There's a lot of things that people should be spending their time doing and they should be bringing metrics into, but they don't necessarily do a great job associated with that, largely because most like manager data-driven enablement is kind of an afterthought for organizations. And to be honest, a lot of sales managers and sales leaderships, they don't necessarily come from like the finance department, operations department, or what have you. They more come from like sales land, and they're compelling communicators and have great bias to action and what have you. And then moreover, they're kind of given these traditional, what we like to call walls of charts, to decipher. And so like that doesn't really do anybody any favors in that regard. And so this is kind of what managers end up doing. And then, I mean, this can actually even bubble all the way up to the leadership level. And so instead, what you should be doing is really paying attention to the metrics that matter on a per rep and per team basis. Kind of like we've been going through a bunch of different KPIs that are important to track on an ongoing basis, certainly on a quarterly basis, to report out to the board. But doing a better job of then like consuming that on an ongoing basis, such that you're not just doing this quarterly. You're not being surprised by things like, oh man, turns out that our win rate really like tanked last quarter. Well, we probably would want to know that like 30 days in the quarter, not 95 days into the quarter when you're done. And so making sure that you're consuming that and actually having proactive goal tracking and early warning alerting. And this is exactly what we do with the customers that we work with. And so that's what we do is we help sales organizations, managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve team performance. And we do that with hundreds and hundreds of customers. Typically, organizations that we work with see anywhere between 30 to 70% improvements in a variety of KPIs that they start managing. So whether that's pipeline hygiene metrics that people are looking to manage, like stuck opportunities or untouched opportunities, or driving higher performance from a customer facing meeting volume standpoint, or driving more AE prospecting. Those are all things that organizations use Atrium to do, and drive higher performance from their higher performance and higher efficiency from their teams. So a little bit on Atrium there, and we can get back to what we're talking about here. Cool. So another kind of really critical component of review in a board meeting, certainly in a QBR, but even in a board meeting as well, to really kind of demonstrate that you have command of your business, is our rampers, right? Because again, a sales organization is only populated, like it's made up of humans, right? The humans are the part, like the part of the engine that make the bookings come out. And so the same way that pipeline this quarter is bookings next quarter, ideally, depending on our win rate. Humans right now are going to and how they're ramping to success, they're going to be our productive or unproductive reps next quarter, the quarter after that, et cetera. And so this is why it's super, super, super important for you to be paying attention to leading indicators of reps in the earn ramp. And so a couple examples of what that might look like. One of the things that kind of a kind of key feature of Atrium is the ability to baseline everybody's at like the same start date here, like take everybody's different start date and baseline them here together. And what that allows you to do is see some pretty cool stuff where you can see people who are on a relative basis, because now we can compare apples to apples, on a relative basis ramping way far in ahead of folks. So as an example, Sir Hiss here is really ramping proactively in a very substantial fashion. What was pink here? Preston B. Whitmore, or maybe Mr. Jolly. I'm not sure exactly which pink that is. I think it's actually Mr. Jolly. These folks are ramping from a lagging indicator booking standpoint. And then we have a couple other folks that are like a little bit lagged here. Now, the thing that I might flag here is that looking at lagging indicators in only the first quarter might be a little bit something that like is a little premature. But if we're out here and kind of like at the end of quarter one, at the end of quarter two, and we see some of these reps who are not in line, like Lucille Krunkelhorn here, and Eli LaBeouf, or actually no, our friend Agent Wendy Pleakley, who don't look like they're ramping the same way that other folks are, that could potentially be cause for concern. And then similarly, we can kind of see that over here, where I think it was Lucille Klunkelhorn over here in purple, kind of lagging from a booking standpoint, also seeing that with respect to a wins basis as well. And then the same with who's Robert Zemersky here, right? And so just making sure that we're getting ahead of that is a really critical thing. So bookings and wins is all well and good, but even more powerful, of course, is our leading indicators there. So in this case, customer facing meeting volume is a really, really great leading indicator. We can kind of see our outperformant rampers right here that are the same as the ones back here from a booking standpoint. Not surprising. You can see that you've got these folks that are lagging behind right here. Who is this? Lucy. Again, our friend Lucille Klunkelhorn, who is lagged on bookings and lagged on wins, but also lagged on meetings on calendar. And the same with Robert Zemersky here, who is again our friend right here, who looks like he's lagging with respect to wins. So this right here scares me. Like this is something that we should, as when you're paying attention to this sort of thing, in a board meeting or in a QBR, these look like potential busted rampers there. And the funny thing about it is, if you look at their opportunity ownership, and unfortunately the color's a little bit off here, but here's our buddy Robert Zemersky in yellow here, even though he is purple over here. His op ownership is fine, or at least looks fine. So he's got a bunch of ops in his pipe, aren't being worked. Same with like Lucille Krunkelhorn here. So this right here is scary and something that should be addressed. And this is the sort of thing that you would want to catch, from a QBR standpoint, but also be able to report out on in your board meeting. Like, hey, like we've got a plan. Like these are the quota bearing reps that are going to be driving success for us in the future, and we've got a plan to fix these folks or offboard them and give their ops to other people. Max, anything you would add here with respect to ramping?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, if you don't pay attention to like your leading indicators, you're probably going to have a bad time. And so that is true in like managing rampers, and it's true in just managing your sales team in general. You just have to like keep tabs on that at all times and have a good grasp on it.
Yeah. And so if you have something special, like Max was kind of noting this earlier, like if there's a specific like thing in your sales motion that's special, like in Atrium's case, we have free account setups, which we call internally data lights. Tracking progress on those, like the number of opportunities that meet that stage, is a really powerful thing to do, right? Like it's another leading indicator. It's not as like coarse as total meeting volume or total opportunity ownership. By the way, total meeting volume and total opportunity ownership, really important, as you can kind of see right here. Like it's pretty obvious that you have two busted rampers in this organization, literally just by looking at their meeting volume or the opportunity ownerships. But say this organization had a pilot motion, or they had some sort of like key part of their motion, or like maybe SEs were involved or what have you. My guess is that the number of opportunities that are making it to that special stage, so even though their opportunity ownership looks fine here, I bet you dollars to donuts that if you looked at that special stage, they're probably not where they need to be, right? They're probably not where they need to be with respect to that. And so I think Max was kind of talking about that earlier, where if you can like atomize your sales motion at kind of the key inflection point. So in the case of like Atrium, it might be turning on a free account because it only takes 2 minutes to do so. That's all well and good, but like we're not in business to just turn on free accounts. Obviously, we want our AEs to get championship from their customers, and then for people to ask for pricing and want a formal proposal, which of course is its own stage as well. So like paying attention by breaking apart the sales motion into those stages, and then measuring how many ops are getting there, and then doing that in ramp, that can help you get more ahead of that sort of thing. The last thing I would kind of touch on is that making sure that you're looking at these various things and then not being surprised can be kind of a tough thing. This is one of the reasons why Atrium has what we call strategy insights. They look at a variety of KPIs that are working together in order to drive an outcome or not. So in this case, you can see that this rep right here is a little bit lagged. This is a strategy, a ramping strategy insight. This rep right here is a little bit lagged with respect to bookings as compared to their peers, and it looks like the root causes associated with that would be fewer opportunities owned and a lower ASP. Their win rate's solid, right? So that, like, rather than having to read the tea leaves like this, having software that automatically reads the tea leaves for you can be a very powerful thing. Wonderful. So last section here, we're going to talk about key initiatives. So oftentimes an organization will have a key initiative in place. The CEO came off the top rope and said, hey, no more, no more neglected ops, right? Or the CFO came off the top rope and said, hey, no more, marketing budgets are going to be cut by like 30%. We got to do AE prospecting. Whatever key initiative might be, it's all well and good for us to declare that, but if you're not going to measure it, it's probably not going to happen. And so that's where what you can do is you can say, these are the key initiatives that we're either we were working on last quarter and how did it turn out, right? Essentially a report card for yourself. Did it work well? Did it not work well? What are we going to what are we going to change accordingly? And then moreover, are there new things that we're going to do this coming quarter, right? So kind of some examples here, if we pop back to some of the things we were looking at earlier, you can see that this organization here, like they deployed a key initiative around AE activity. It's like very, very, very obvious that this organization said, hey, we're going to take our AEs from having 30-ish customer facing meetings a month, which is like a pretty lackadaisical pace if you think about that, and we're gonna take this up a notch, right? And you can see that it actually happened, right? That's a very powerful thing. Now, of course, this organization in question did that by kind of deploying Atrium, but this is like, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it, and if you don't manage it, it's not going to happen, right? And so depending on like whatever initiative that might be AE prospecting or pipeline hygiene or sales activity, as kind of noted earlier, you're going to want to measure that. And so in this case, so for instance, if we said, hey, you know what, we have an expectation that our AEs are going to be doing a lot more prospecting. Cool. So what we would then look at is we would say, all right, we're going to measure we're going to set some KPIs around what would indicate that that's actually happening or not. So in this case, what we could say is, okay, how many accounts are our reps touching on a monthly basis? And you can see this organization jumped their accounts, their account engagement up pretty substantially. You can see the same thing with respect to email volume right here, right? Or alternatively, pipeline hygiene. If now you've got fewer opportunities that are coming inbound, we might want to do a better job of managing those opportunities and making sure that people are on top of their ops, saying that like, hey, what is this? Having 15 of your 30 opportunities haven't been touched in 30 days. It's kind of piss poor.
Ouch.
Yeah, like don't tell the CMO, right? Don't tell the VP of marketing, because he or she's going to come onto the sales floor and start like, flipping tables. But getting that down to only like 6, right? Maybe six opportunities maybe out of your 30 that haven't had a touch in 30 days, might be one of those like those special ops that you're tucking away. They're going to buy next quarter, right? And the same with respect to stuck opportunities as well. But again, key initiative, maybe it's pipeline hygiene, making sure that we're on top of our stuff. If you don't measure it, you're not going to be able to manage it. You're not going to be able to improve it. And I guess actually I kind of like ruined my own surprise here. Key initiative around activity volumes, right? So in this case, saying, hey, you know what, we're gonna amp things up. We want to have more first meetings and more second meetings. We want to work our opportunities better. In this case, this organization had a little bit more first meetings, but you can see that most of the progress with respect to this organization was through second meetings instead. And so this is like why it's super, super important to measure these things so you can manage it. This is why when we say like, being a data-driven organization is a more effective way of managing your org. This is like what we see in our customers, is that anywhere from like 30 to 70% improvements in key metrics. So like whether you're talking about like AE meeting volume going up, like from a baseline going up 20 to 50%, pipeline hygiene getting better from an untouched opportunity standpoint, or even just like AE prospecting activity, whatever it is that like you happen to be focused on, as soon as you start measuring it, holding people accountable and managing it, you're going to see better outcomes associated with that. And the same is true in SDR land as well, right? Where you can see anywhere between, we've seen customers that have raised their pipeline generation, but anywhere from 50% to 130%, doubling their pipe that's being created on a per SDR basis. And usually where that's being driven is by a higher output of prospecting activity, or kind of quality of prospecting activity. Max, we're kind of wrapping up here. Anything like you'd like to add before we wrap?
Not really. I mean, this is probably my favorite part about working here, though, is just like chatting with sales leaders about the initiatives or things that they're working on, and then like helping them workshop ways to like deploy assets or insights or what have you to kind of help tackle those things. So
Yep, for sure. I mean, it is pretty fun to see how sales organizations can really change their outputs by just a little bit of data-driven sales management. Cool. So as we were noting earlier, we have an offer that we're offering to folks here. If you'd like to join the half-day virtual boot camp with Richard Harris, as normally would cost $1,000, we're hosting it for free, gratis. We're going to go ahead and drop our link here in the chat, and you can go ahead and sign up for that if you would like to do so. And we'll go ahead and drop that here in a second. So otherwise, Angelica, are you here to kick us out?
I am. I just dropped the link. You got it. Yeah, sorry about that. And you can also pull out your phone and take a photo of the QR code. Definitely sign up. It's such a great boot camp, and join us for the next one. And thank you everyone for joining today's session. Just a reminder that the key takeaways and the recording along with Pete's slide deck will be made available on the MSP previous event page before the end of day. And I want to give a big thanks to Max and Pete for your time today. That was super informative. Thanks everyone.
Wonderful. Bye.